So I'm thinking about running for president, and I don't know if I'd be a good candidate or a bad one. I kind of know how a Republican can win, whether it's me or somebody else, and it has to be much more uplifting, much more positive, much more willing to, to be practical now in Washington world, lose the primary to win the general, right, without violating your principles.
All right, I don't know how you lose the primary, though, and win the nomination. Joining us now is Klondik. He's managing editor of University of Virginia Center for Politics and managing editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball. Welcome back, Kyle.
Hey, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I believe, I have no idea, and let's work under the premise that Jeb Bush does throw his hat in the ring. Sure. How's he going to do?
Here's the thing is that I think when you're running for either party's presidential nomination, I think particularly for the Republicans, it's kind of good to be the candidate from the sort of establishment part of the party. And you're not going to find anybody who's more of an establishment candidate than Jeb Bush. Of course, his father was president, his brother was president. I feel like a lot of the Republicans, the senior Republicans on Capitol Hill, want Jeb Bush to be their candidate. Whether that's a good idea or not, I think that's just a fact. And so I think that Jeb Bush would be a pretty credible contender for the nomination. But of course, there are lots of other people considering runs. And I think it's also fair to question whether even Republicans may be sort of burnt out on the Bushes.
Now, okay, fair. That's very fair. Plus, I think he's too far to the left to actually win those primaries. But let's go to the man who did win the primaries, even though some considered him too far to the left, Mitt Romney. He topped the latest CNN poll. I know those polls don't have much meaning, or maybe you interpret it better than I can. What does it mean that Romney's name keeps popping up either at the very top or near the top of almost every poll that's being taken at this early point?
I think that these early polls are kind of a measure of name ID and not a whole lot else. I do think that Mitt Romney, I think by the time the general election in 2012 was over with, I think there were a lot of Republicans who kind of came around to him. He's been working hard for Republicans since 2012, and I think he still has, kind of positive feelings amongst Republicans. But I think it's also an indication that it's a really crowded field that doesn't have an obvious front runner, and so when people are asked what candidate they support and they're given the option of Romney, he may be the name that most Republicans are most familiar with, and I think that explains why he might top some of these surveys, and he very well could run again too. It sounds like that's somewhat of a possibility, although Bush looks like a likelier candidate now than Romney, and they'd be competing for the same voters.
And when we're talking, I forget who it was not too long ago said that it should be a governor, or governors make better presidents. But I mean, we're talking about. You think John Kasich is going to run because you hear his name, coming out a lot lately?
Sure. Yeah, I think John Kasich, governor of Ohio, is also a possibility. I mean, look, it looks like Chris Christie's going to run. It looks like Ted Cruz is going to run. It looks like Rand Paul's going to run.
Scott Walker.
Scott Walker. Yeah, I mean, without Bobby Jindal, without an obvious front runner, and Jeb Bush may or may not be that person once if he enters the field. I think a lot of Republicans look at this nomination and say that A, it's worth having because the Republican nominee may very well win, and two, that it's very gettable given how wide open the field is.
Is it good though that there might be like 15 candidates?
Look, I think I'd rather. I think if I were a Republican looking at this field, it's nice to have options just as a voter. I mean, it kind of looks like the Democrats might not have much of an option.
Right.
That's certainly less interesting for the voters, and hey, of course, less interesting for us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, always great to talk to you, sir. We'll speak to you soon. Have a great holiday.
Hey, you too. Thanks.
Thank you. Kyle Klondik, ladies and gentlemen, managing editor of the UVA Center for Politics and managing editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball. That's Larry Sabato, of course. Yeah, I can't wait. These next 2 years are going to be every political junkie's dream, plus the ramifications for the country. And I've said this over the past couple of elections, but they cannot be greater. Do we keep America and go back and reclaim some of that old America, or go forward the way we're going? All right, we're coming back, folks. Don't go away.